Now, normally on this channel, I don't talk much about leaks or rumors. In fact, I tend to try and actively avoid them, though usually one way or another they reach me anyway. And very recently, I've heard one that has gotten my attention a bit more than most because it seemed like a relatively small and believable leak that could have very interesting ramifications for the next movie. And before I go on here, I do want to warn you that potentially this could be a spoiler for episode 9, though if this rumor's true, it's most likely not one because it'll probably be seen or featured in the upcoming marketing campaign for the movie. Nevertheless, you have been warned. Okay, so the rumor is that Kylo Ren is going to be repairing or reforging his helmet, the one he smashed after Snoke ridiculed him for wearing it in episode 8. Furthermore, the helmet is going to be held together by some sort of red crystalline material that supposedly makes it or him look corrupted. And operating under the assumption that this rumor is true, which it of course might not be, this could imply that J.J. Abrams may be going back to his original idea that Kylo Ren will be some type of Vader wannabe, which may be disappointing for some to hear, but music to the ears of others. And intended or not, if this is true, it could end up symbolizing Disney and Lucasfilm trying to put the shattered pieces of their franchise's fanbase back together again in the wake of Episode 8. Either way, I do believe Episode 9 is going to be an attempt to apologize for the mess caused by Episode 8 within said fanbase. And before those who loved The Last Jedi get angry and take to the comments to disagree or yell at me, I'm not implying he's going to retcon the previous movie. That'd do more harm than good considering there's no point in winning some fans back, those who didn't like The Last Jedi, just to lose those that did. I'm saying this next movie will be an effort to create something that unites all fans, which is what this whole trilogy should have been to begin with. Because you really need to look at this from Disney's perspective here. A few years back now, they spent just over $4 billion to purchase Lucasfilm, and then promptly began construction on 2 massive Star Wars-themed areas for their parks, called Galaxy's Edge, of course, which will be in Disneyland and Disney World, respectively. They're also no doubt hoping that Star Wars-related shows will help sell their upcoming Disney Plus streaming service, and streaming is very much seen as the future of entertainment by many experts. And then, of course, there's also how much they were hoping to make off merchandise, and of course, at the box office with their movies. In other words, to make the most obvious statement you may ever hear in your life, Disney very much has a vested interest in fans continuing to have a vested interest in Star Wars. They may not acknowledge it, and I've discussed the likely reasons why in other videos, but don't for one second think they haven't noticed all the angry fans, that they haven't heard about the active boycott by some against what they thought would be an extremely lucrative IP or brand. Don't mistake their inaction for apathy, when behind the scenes I'm sure they're demanding results out of Lucasfilm with Episode 9 after the controversy caused by Episode 8 and the financial failure of Solo. Which leads me now to ask you this question. If you had been president of Lucasfilm since day one of the Disney era, which of course has been Kathleen Kennedy's job, what would you have done with the sequel trilogy? What would have been your game plan or overall goal for it? And I'm asking you to think about this, again, from the business side of things, not just thinking with your heart. And to me, the answer to this question seems extremely simple in theory, but a little more difficult in practice. Anyway, I would look at my franchise and recognize I already have a relatively split customer base coming off of the prequels, that there are fans who love them and grew up with them, and there are those generally older fans who grew up with the original trilogy who may not like them that much or at all, though there are certainly older fans who do enjoy them, don't get me wrong. There is also a new generation coming up, a distracted generation, that has plenty of other entertainment options besides Star Wars to choose from, that I would of course want to capture somehow. My goal then, taking all of that into account, would have been to find someone to create a story, a full story, all 3 parts of the trilogy, or at least an outline for it ahead of time, that focused entirely on honoring and enhancing the story of the first 2 trilogies, or that really tried to tie everything together into one cohesive tale, yet still had at least some sort of unexpected twist or shocking reveal in it that, to some degree, really got people buzzing about Star Wars again. And no, that reveal wouldn't have come at the price of forsaking any of my legacy characters I plan on making money on for years to come yet. The hopes in all this would be creating something that both prequel haters and lovers could enjoy and get behind, a bridge between them, if you will. The sequel trilogy should have been about healing a fan base that was already divided, not doing anything that might risk further division, especially not so early on in the Disney era. Because we're right away trying to get people on board with a Star Wars that no longer has George Lucas at the helm, to prove we understand Star Wars even without him, and that it can still be what you've always known and loved. Not to come out of the box and say, we're going to do something different with it, let the past be damned. Because the more you harken back to the past, to people's childhoods, and Episode 7 did a good job of this, don't get me wrong, the more likely parents are going to want to take their kids to see it and try to get them interested in Star Wars and even hooked on it as they once were, or maybe still are. And as I alluded to earlier, capturing the attention of the youngest generation for more than a millisecond before they move on to something else is not easy. The best way to reach them while they're young is through their parents, who will, shall we say to make a bad pun, force the issue. Furthermore, this new story told in the sequel trilogy really needs to justify its own existence. Not only does it have to honor the two previous trilogies, it also has to further the story in a truly meaningful way, considering it's undoing an ending that many people enjoyed and found satisfying, which is the end of Return of the Jedi. If it doesn't, then it's not only going to feel like Disney and Lucasfilm just trying to capitalize off the titles Episodes 7, 8, and 9 to guarantee success or to be a cash grab, when they should have just called it something different if it wasn't going to be a true continuation. And though you're certainly free to argue against this being the approach they should have taken, when I look at The Force Awakens, I see the start of a story that seemingly was trying to do pretty much exactly what I'm describing here. Then The Last Jedi came along and, in the eyes of many, all but ignored the idea of creating something that would unite the fanbase and just completely drove it apart instead. But the real strange part about The Last Jedi is how it completely regresses the overall story and renders everything that happened in the original trilogy utterly meaningless. Look at it this way, after Episode 3 the Jedi had been wiped out, though there was still a hope out there, and the Republic had been destroyed and an evil regime was taking its place. And now after Episode 8, the Jedi have been wiped out, though there's still a hope out there, and the Republic has been destroyed and an evil regime is taking its place. So remind me again what the original trilogy accomplished. What's its place in the story exactly if everything that happened in it, such as the Return of the Jedi and the Republic, was completely undone? And no, I'm not trying to sound like a bitter original trilogy fanboy here. Instead, I'm very much wondering what the point of resetting the story to a previous point is. And you might say that it was J.J. Abrams who blew up the New Republic's capital in his movie, and the one who put Luke on that island. However, it was Rian Johnson who decided that having that capital destroyed, or the Hosnian system, would essentially be the end of the New Republic, instead of just putting them on their heels. And also, he was the one who decided that Luke had given up, not gone to the island for some other reason, like something as simple as looking for a way to stop Snoke, and awaiting Rey, who perhaps, in a vision, he saw coming to him while he was on the island, which would be the reason why Luke's old lightsaber basically directed her to him. What I'm trying to say here is that the sequel trilogy should have been about testing the recently returned Jedi and New Republic, not about wiping them out so that they had to be built again. That was the entire point of the previous trilogy, and initially Snoke and the First Order appeared to be those tests, but now one is gone and the other defeated the New Republic in one fell swoop. And how jealous Palpatine would be to know that the First Order accomplished in one day what took him years of careful planning to conjure up, and years more to bring to fruition. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that J.J. Abrams has a lot to try and wrap up in one movie, and he has to wrap it up again in a way that justifies the existence of the entire sequel trilogy. He has to give us an ending that makes us believe this was all worthwhile, and that the ending of Return of the Jedi should have been undone for it. And the only way to have any hope of doing that is to bring Anakin and or Darth Vader into the picture, which is what Episode 7 seemed to be setting up with Kylo Ren, begging the melted helmet of Darth Vader to show him the power of the dark side again. And when you consider here that it's already been reported that J.J. Abrams is going to try and create something that wraps up the whole story, all three trilogies, it makes sense that Kylo would go back to his Vader-worshipping ways and reforge his broken mask, and maybe, just maybe, begin to reforge the fandom in the process. Because, not to call anyone's resolve into question here, but I'd wager most of the fans who say they're done with Star Wars would come back if they heard Episode 9 was that damn good. And especially if those who hated The Last Jedi, but went to see it anyway, were also saying it's worth checking out. And that's got to be the goal right now for Disney and Lucasfilm, to bring back as many fans as you can while not irritating the ones who were happy with The Last Jedi. And I can't imagine anyone who would be disappointed with an ending chapter where Kylo Ren is trying desperately to live up to the legacy of Darth Vader, but failing and refusing to let go, and needs to be saved somehow by a combination of Rey, Leia, and the Force ghosts of Anakin and Luke, but maybe he doesn't come back to the light. And don't get me wrong here, I would have been all for a movie in the near future that is divisive or shakes up the status quo and changes things in the Star Wars galaxy. Episode 8 was just the wrong time and place to take such a risk, not looking at this from a business perspective. It wasn't time to create another argument in the fanbase when there is still one ongoing over the prequels. Though yes, as of late, the hatred towards the prequels has died down quite a bit, but likely that's because it's been refocused as hate for the sequel trilogy, which is very unfortunate, because the sequels should have elevated the prequels, not by being worse than them, but instead by honoring them. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of this rumor that Kylo Ren will repair and wear his mask again in Episode 9. And do you think this next movie will go out of its way to heal the fanbase or not? Either way, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.